good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to In Conversations with Changemakers, another opportunity for us to have a conversation with individuals that have significant impact in the local communities where they serve, their local businesses and organisations. So today, I'm delighted to have someone I consider to be a friend and a colleague join us today, Murray Hurps, who is the Director of Entrepreneurship for UTS. Hello, Murray.
Hello. You just made me feel very nice about myself.
Oh,
Thank you.
bless you, Murray.
I consider you a friend as well.
Yeah, no. So well, we've known. It must be a good best part of 10 years, Murray. When I first met you, when you were the GM at Fishburners. So I'll start there. Actually, I don't know. That's when we first had the opportunity to work together, and I'm not sure if that was your first introduction into the startup community, Murray, or if it's something that you had, a life before then.
I did. So basically, I started a company when I was 16. It was blocking advertising on the net. I liked writing software. I was a bit of a nerd. And people started paying for it. It was terrible software back then, but when people are paying money for something, you have a reason to make it better. And that company ran for 14 years, peak of 100 million active users. And I never thought of it as a startup because back then, like 98, in Australia, there wasn't a kind of startup scene. And I just remember becoming aware of Fishburners and walking in and going, oh, wow, there's people like me around here that are sitting on their computers and running companies that deal with customers around the world. And that was nice. This kind of shock of not being alone, which for a long time before then I was sitting in a bedroom, little home office thing, that dealing with people around the world, and now being introduced to this world where no, there are people working together in Sydney, and Sydney has more and more and more people like this running interesting startups. It was amazing.
I didn't realise that, right? So you felt included.
Yeah, felt a bit normal.
Yeah. So did you walk in and just hand in your resume then, Murray, or the
I
few
signed
steps?
up.
Yeah.
I signed up as a member. Was working from there for a while. Got elected by the community onto the board, and then they needed a new GM in a hurry, and I said I'll do that. And it was a really fun time.
Yeah. Brilliant. So then,
And you would remember this as well, Luli. Sorry to
no,
dive in, but back then, that kind of splash of Fishburners and River City Labs and all the other places that were opening up around Australia at the time was interesting. Like it was a different way of looking at Australia. And some people will say, oh, no, we've always been doing companies like that. This was different in the number of those kind of tech-enabled companies starting, growing, working together, the visibility of it, the amount of venture capital starting to come into existence. It was an interesting time, kind of 2012 onwards in the transformation of Australia.
yeah, it's true, and it hasn't always been that way, and it's easy when you think now. The growth of fish burners and different locations here and internationally. You just didn't see that sort of thing back then. Yeah. But I guess what was it during your time at Fishburners, Murray, that you co-founded Startup Master? What led you to that?
Yeah, that was Startup Oz was starting to do things around 2014, and and that was good. The kind of growing advocacy for here's tech-enabled companies, and we need more of those, and here's the things they can do. But there was always a kind of shortage of data, and people would be asking, what kind of startups do we have? What impact are they having? What challenges are they facing? And the kind of supporting data to answer those questions wasn't fantastic. So I just thought, bugger it, let's, excuse my language, let's do it. And so funded the first 2 years by myself, and then I was lucky enough to get Google and Department of Industry, Innovation and Science support for the next 3 years. And for 5 years, it was the largest survey of Australian startups. And it's been interesting because just collecting and publishing that kind of data, since then, so the number of people that have come to me and said, my incubator was based on basically a proposal that used Startup Muster kind of references, or my government grants program, or my VC fund that was focused on a certain niche, or I thought about locating my company in Australia because of what I could see in the Startup Muster reports. There is hundreds of millions of dollars of kind of support for the ecosystem that I think can be in part attributed to what Startup Muster was doing.
Fantastic.
So mission accomplished in terms of just a public benefit thing, that if you have good data, you can make good decisions.
Yeah, and then I've recently spoken with Dr. Ian Opperman, and he couldn't agree with you more on that side of things, Murray.
Mr. Data.
Mr. Data himself, Mr. Analytics. So is there an ongoing role for Startup Muster?
Yeah, I think the funding has not been there for the last 2 years. So I continue to work on figuring out how to bring that back. I think now more than ever, we need to know what's happening in the ecosystem, how many incubators are in trouble or disappearing, how many accelerators attached to corporate kind of innovation budgets have disappeared, and what is out there now and what support do they need.
Right. Well, a big shout out there then to any potential funders. Murray Hurps, his name is. You'll know him already, no doubt. This leads into my next question then, in regards to some of what the biggest challenges are in regards to understanding the depth and breadth of the startup landscape. Because it's that. I guess that's the premise of part of the premise of Startup Muster.
Well, this is the thing. Australia has different kinds of startups. And I think it should have different kinds of startups. If we're just looking at Silicon Valley and saying, how do we do that here? That's completely disregarding the kind of competitive advantages that Australia has that will allow companies to grow here that won't automatically grow somewhere else, and will keep those companies here as well, so that there's some retained benefit for Australia. I think we need to spend a lot more time thinking about what are the kind of case studies we can look at of successful entrepreneurs over the last 10 years in Australia. And you would be able to name a lot of them, but understanding what those companies are and why they were able to start in Australia, I think is critical if we want more of those kind of Australia appropriate technology enabled companies.
Yeah. And so how easy is it? No, I'm making an assumption it's easy. How easy is it, or challenging is it for a startup in Australia to be successful, obtain the sort of information and support they need to be successful?
Okay. Define success.
Good question.
Sorry.
I guess okay. Yeah. Well, no. It's an appropriate response, because how do they define success? Is it about funding? That seems to be a big sort of metric that a lot of startups define success by. Is it funding?
Well, okay, this is where it gets tricky. Thank you for answering my question back to you. Yes. Think of it like this. I think as soon as you're going down the VC path, you need to have returns for your company that make sense for a VC.
Yeah.
So by taking that pathway, which is a legitimate, wonderful pathway, you have to have a return that accounts for all the other early stage investments of that VC not working out. So that's fine. And I think that puts you on a different kind of growth pathway yourself than you would otherwise be comfortable with. I've been looking at a lot of the old Fishburners companies from 5 years ago, of which there was like 900. There's a really surprising proportion that is still running. Wow. And having different levels of success for themselves. They're probably not making the newspaper, but they're making more than those people could from this normal employment, and working in a way that they get to work how they want, when they want, where they want. They get to work on things that they care about. They get to solve problems that matter to them. They get to kind of just basically have a different approach to how they work in the world that entrepreneurs only get to have.
Yeah.
And I'd say that is successful to some extent, and I'd say probably more successful than they would have been as just normal employees within a large company. So I'd say, how hard is it to be successful in Australia? Hard, but probably not as hard as people might think.
Yeah, depending on how they're defining success.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. That. So, Mo, talk to me about your role as Director of Entrepreneurship for UTS. Uh, are there a lot of entrepreneurs? I mean, it's just, where do you find them? They find you? I mean, tell me.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a secret.
Yeah.
Please don't tell anyone. Anyone watching,
Between
please
the
don't tell anyone.
between the two of us.
Exactly. I have the easiest job in the world at UTS because we have incredibly entrepreneurial students.
Yeah.
There is a different kind of person that comes to UTS versus other universities. And for example, we did a survey just before I started there of uh, the student body, and 40% were saying they wanted to start or join a tech startup as their preferred kind of pathway to employment.
Wow.
40%.
Wow.
And I think that's probably higher today, especially in the pandemic. Um, the work we do there is about trying to encourage that enthusiasm so people feel comfortable in taking that step as a technology enabled entrepreneur. And then supporting all those people that start something to continue what they start and find what they need and kind of grow that out. So it's not a normal accelerator program. It's about basically putting people on a different pathway to what they signed up for. So if you're a midwifery student, for example, that's fantastic. But are there things that you discover in the course of studying that that you can kind of take a device that solves a problem and commercialize that, or do something else that is different to a normal graduate pathway? When I joined, there were 36 active startups there that we could find. There's now 350 active
Wow.
student launch startups that we're supporting. So it's working.
Wow.
The students are responding well to it. Those startups are going well, and I just feel good that I'll end my spiel in a second.
No.
That a university can do more than just create job-ready graduates and productivity boosting research,
Yeah.
which I think most universities would argue they do. They need to create the third leg of that, which is entrepreneurs to create the jobs for the graduates and to disseminate those new innovations around the place.
I love that.
It's you can't just have a commercialization office that sends things out into the world. I think there's a more sophisticated approach of getting a lot of entrepreneurs to take things into the world as well.
I love that, and I think the point I take away from that, Murray, is presenting that as as an option. When I think back to my education, the options that were presented back then were very limited. You're either going to be an accountant, a doctor. So yeah, it's entrepreneur to that to be an option.
This
Fantastic.
is this is what we do to people. Education in Australia is fantastic. But it also, without trying to, funnels people towards certain choices. You achieve an ATAR, you don't want to waste the ATAR, so you look at what can I get into, or what might I be able to get into, what does it pay? Talk to a couple of people, go to a careers fair and career advisor, and then do the best you can. No one is saying you need a really high ATAR to be an entrepreneur, to create your own job and create, billion-dollar companies, or a smaller company that's still really impactful. And so we're trying to fix that, but obviously a little bit late in the process. I'd love to see more being done in high schools, primary schools around Australia, to make this a more normal thing than it is today.
Yeah, fantastic. And are you doing programs with schools at that sort of level, Murray? Is that something that's on the roadmap for you?
We are, but on a small scale. I'd love
Yeah,
to be doing a much larger scale.
yeah.
And there's other people doing work in that area, but I'd love to see something that's kind of baked into curriculum in Australia. There's
Yeah,
some interesting things in South Australia and other pockets around the place, but I think we're in a pandemic. We need new jobs created and high-paying jobs created. Entrepreneurs create new jobs and they disseminate innovations and boost the productivity of existing companies and all the good things that they do. If ever there was a time for Australia to say, yes, we recognize the need for more entrepreneurs and people out there that's doing things for themselves, now is the time. And simultaneously, technology is making it possible to create solutions that weren't possible before for one person on a laptop in
yeah,
Bathurst or wherever else. and to distribute that solution to the world at zero cost, potentially as well, and to do it during a lockdown in a pandemic. So maybe now's the time to be doing it.
Have you seen any good examples of other countries around the world, Murray, that have good programs built into the school curriculum around entrepreneurship? So, yeah, so that's a word they learn at a young age or understand at a young age.
There's a multitude, and I
Yeah,
think the whatever you want to find, you'll be able to find somewhere in the world.
yeah,
The tricky part is entrepreneurial self-efficacy. So the kind of confidence of entrepreneurs, and we've got some wonderful research at UTS from Martin Bleemel and others that shows as you learn about being an entrepreneur, you want to be one less. So for anyone watching, that's a takeaway from this as well, that if you say, I'm going to read all these books and then think about starting my own startup, you might get halfway through the books, but you probably won't do anything with it. I much prefer people actually starting something and learning as they do, because then you have a reason to learn. You're not going to be good on day one. You'll make a lot of mistakes, but if you limit your kind of exposure in the risks that you take, I think that's a much better way to learn, through practically trying things and learning what you need, rather than trying to educate a lot of people and hoping that changes behavior, which I think is not the way to do it.
yeah, yeah. Now I'm just getting conscious of time, Murray. So I'm just going to ask you this question: what's the one piece of advice that you'd give an entrepreneur looking to scale their startup?
Well, this is the thing. I think as soon as they're on that pathway, you're making money from something and you can make some more money, or you're having impact from something and you want to have more impact. That's a relatively easy problem to solve. I think for everyone watching this, I think that the most important problem is, think of the millions of people that could be starting something, and in a couple of years facing that problem of, how do I scale this from I'm comfortable now to I'm ridiculously wealthy now, or whatever the goal you actually have is, or I'm changing the world now. It's those millions of people are the opportunity in Australia and around the world. So everyone watching this, firstly, thank you for watching. Think about what you're doing. If you're not already doing something entrepreneurial, is it something that makes sense in the future? How long are you going to wait? How are you going to feel if you see other people doing the thing that you're thinking about doing? This kind of regret minimization is a nice thing to think about, of what can you do today in lockdown if you're kind of doing less than you normally would, or your manager is watching you a bit less than they normally would, or you're maybe unemployed, or maybe thinking about changing your employment. Now's the time to do it. It's never been easier. The kind of resources that people have never been more amazing. The scale of opportunities, the number of opportunities that are sitting, waiting for you on the device that you're watching this on, if you decide to start to pursue something, is this ridiculous. And I think worth considering for anyone out there that's watching this. Or if that's not for you, think about all the people you know. Maybe your children could see this as a more normal thing from their parent, or your friends, or other people in your life. Are you encouraging other people that are trying something, or are you saying, why would you do that when you had a good job at whatever? I think it's the time to encourage, and the time to encourage yourself as well.
And I think there's been some great examples of individuals and businesses being very creative in their thinking and resourceful during the pandemic. But yeah, you're right. But before I let you go, Murray, a fun skill or hobby that you've developed during the pandemic?
Patience. That's probably the number one thing. You can get anything done in our kind of part of the world of encouraging entrepreneurs and supporting entrepreneurs if you're patient, persistent, tolerant, and you're there to support people when they need it. And now is the time to be to have those skills and to be persevering and doing what we do. I think this kind of environment we're in has damaged a lot of relationships and professional relationships as well. Like I would much prefer Luli to be at a large event with yourself, or running some large campaign with yourself in the way that I know you do incredibly well in both cases and other cases. and no, we're sitting on a Zoom chat instead, having a nice chat, but it's not the same. And I
No.
just look forward to things coming back to normal and us going at full speed again. It's going to feel wonderful if we're kind of patient and prepared for those moments.
Yeah, you're right, Murray. I mean, yeah, patience is definitely something we're all having to practice right now. But Murray, thank you very, very much. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. But you're right. I can't wait till we can do it in person.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Lily.
Cheers, Murray.